Vision Quest was a big stretch from 16 Candles, and I need to make those stretches as an actor, and I think that I get the parts because I can bring something to it, to the character that maybe somebody else couldn't.
A Netflix producer offered Michael Schoeffling $500,000 in 2024 just to talk about his past. He said no. Before that, he turned down $1 million to return as Jake Ryan. Before that, he rejected the Iceman role in Top Gun that made Val Kilmer a star. At 31, with scripts pouring in, he quit Hollywood completely and started making furniture in his garage. The reason he gave? It was darker than anyone expected, and the life he built in secret has become the most expensive mystery in Hollywood history. Michael Schoeffling was born on December 10, 1960, in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. At the time, it was a coal mining town with a population a little over 40,000, the kind of place where winters bite hard and people learn early that nothing gets handed to you. His parents, George and Elizabeth Schoeffling, raised him in a working-class home where the rules were simple. Work first. Be practical. Do not chase shine just because it is loud. Even when the family later moved to South Jersey, that early Pennsylvania grit stayed in him. Friends would later describe him as humble and self-reliant, like he carried the mindset of a town where you lean on the community, but you also learn to stand on your own. That same tough focus followed him into school sports, and it became obvious at Cherokee High School in Evesham Township, New Jersey. He graduated in 1978, but before that, he had already built a name on the wrestling mat. He was a standout, even earning recognition as a District 7 champion. New Jersey wrestling in the late 1970s was not a casual thing. It was fierce, and it demanded discipline every single day. So his success was not just talent. It was repetition, pain, and stubborn drive. And that matters, because those habits do not disappear. They just change shape later. After high school, he went to Temple University in Philadelphia and studied liberal arts from 1978 to 1982. On paper, it looked like a normal path. College, degree, a future that made sense. But life turned fast. While he was on campus, he got noticed for his 6-foot physique while working out. And that attention opened a door he did not plan for. The college path started to fade, and the modeling world stepped in. It was a strange switch, because one day you are a student trying to figure out what you want, and the next day people are looking at you like you are a product that can sell a mood. By 1982, at age 22, the discovery story got even sharper. He was spotted during a New York casting call, and the name tied to that moment was Bruce Weber, the fashion photographer with serious power in that era. Weber was drawn to Schoeffling's rugged athletic look and that intense stare that cameras love because it does half the work by itself. Soon, Schoeffling was booked for multiple GQ spreads that ran from 1983 to 1985. Those shoots leaned into a raw, shirtless style that made him pop off the page. It also lined up with what men's fashion was doing then, shifting toward that urban athlete image. And just like that, he became one of the faces people remembered without even knowing his full story. The money and the reach were real. During his modeling peak, he reportedly earned $5,000 per shoot as a rookie. In the early 1980s, when the average hourly wage in the US was around $8, that number felt wild. He appeared in over 12 GQ issues, which meant millions of readers saw him again and again until the image started turning into a kind of fame. And it did not stop with GQ. His look became linked to major ads, including Calvin Klein and Levi's, campaigns built to hit hard and stay in your head. The brooding face, the athletic frame, the quiet confidence, it all sold the message without needing words. Still, what makes his path interesting is that somebody saw more than a model. Bruce Weber did not just use him for photos and move on. He reportedly paid for Schoeffling to take acting classes at the Lee Strasberg Theater Institute in Manhattan. That mattered, because Strasberg training was not about looking good on camera. It was about control, emotion, and digging into a scene until it feels real. Starting in 1984, that training helped shift him from being photographed to actually performing. Without that push, he might have stayed a top model and nothing more. Instead, the runway image started turning into a film career. And then Hollywood happened in a quiet way first, almost like a test. In 1984, he had an uncredited cameo in Racing with the Moon, filmed in Chicago. He played an amputee soldier and had no lines, but even in a few seconds he could register something on his face that made people look twice. The film starred Sean Penn and Elizabeth McGovern, and it did not need Schoeffling to be a star to give him a crack in the door. It was enough that casting eyes noticed him. It was enough that he was now inside the machine. Around the same time, teen culture pulled him in even harder. In May 1984, he appeared in 17 magazine's swimsuit issue, and the reaction was big. The story goes that the fan mail surged past 10,000 letters, which is hard to picture now. But back then, it meant something. It meant teenage readers were not just noticing him, they were chasing him. That kind of attention spreads fast, and it tells agents one simple thing: this face can sell. Then came the role that froze his image in pop culture. 16 Candles was the prize, and he almost missed it. John Hughes first noticed him in a GQ spread, but casting was not automatic. Casting director Jackie Birch had other names in the mix, including Viggo Mortensen. The final chemistry test happened in New York, and it was intense because the scene was paired with a 15-year-old Molly Ringwald. What happened in that room became part of the legend later. Mortensen kissed Ringwald during the screen test. Schoeffling, who was 23 at the time, refused to kiss her. The story says Birch saw that restraint as perfectly Jake, cool and distant, but not creepy. Ringwald later recalled it in plain words, saying she was 15, she flew to New York to read with everyone. Michael Schoeffling did not kiss her during the audition, and Viggo Mortensen did. That single detail ends up carrying a lot of weight, because it shows how one choice can change an outcome, and also change how a character feels on screen. Birch's reasoning, as it has been quoted, leaned on vibe and fit, not just looks. She said she met Mortensen, she heard an accent, and he seemed like he did not want her to hear it. She also said she did not think he was right for Jake. Meanwhile, Schoeffling's quiet, reserved presence, plus that decision during the test, sold the idea that he could be the dream guy without making the audience uneasy. It is a small moment, but it shaped the tone of the romance. By the time he officially became Jake Ryan, the machine moved fast. 16 Candles was filmed in the summer of 1983, mainly around Evanston, Skokie, and Highland Park in the Chicago suburbs, locations that would become the backbone of the John Hughes world. Fans still point to real addresses, like the Baker House at 3022 Payne Street in Evanston, and Jake Ryan's home at 1407 Waverly Road in Highland Park, because people love touching the real ground behind a movie memory. On set, Schoeffling also showed a hint of looseness behind the quiet image. He improvised during the famous cake scene, tossing out lines Hughes liked enough to keep. Ringwald later laughed about how his ad-libs made her giggle, and Hughes kept them because they felt like real, awkward teenage energy. But here is where the story gets less glossy, because playing the dream guy is not always a dream. Off-set, there were reports that he clashed with the grind. Some shooting days stretched up to 18 hours, and exhaustion changes your mood fast. At one point, The story goes that he walked off set, frustrated and worn down, and described the experience as soul-crushing for a young actor stuck in the pretty boy box. Even if the movie looked light and fun on screen, the schedule behind it could feel brutal. And fame has its own weight too, especially when you never asked to be a poster. When the film hit theaters in April 1984, it was a clear success. It grossed $23 million on a $6.5 million budget, and it turned into a cultural stamp for teen movies. For Schoeffling, the fame spike was immediate and overwhelming. He reportedly received over 50,000 fan letters, mostly from teenage girls who saw Jake Ryan as the perfect fantasy. The problem was that he did not seem to enjoy the label. He did not lean into the heartthrob machine like some people would. Instead, he seemed uncomfortable with it, like the attention was noise that kept following him into every room. When Michael Schoeffling stepped into Vision Quest in 1985 as Kenny Kuch Kuchera, it did not feel like a normal acting job. It felt like he was walking back into his own high school years, back into that tight world where your body hurts and you still show up. So he treated it like a real cut for a real match. He dropped 15 pounds before filming and trained the way actual wrestlers train, not the way actors usually pretend to train. That mattered because the fight scenes with Matthew Modine needed real contact and real timing. Even when he faced a stunt double who weighed about 180 pounds, the point was to make it look like the pressure was real. The mornings were early, the drills were hard, and by the time the cameras rolled, nobody had to fake sweat or exhaustion. Modine later talked about how Schoeffling stood out because he already knew the sport. And on the first take, Schoeffling even pinned his stunt double, which instantly changed how the cast and crew looked at him. Suddenly, it was not just a film. It felt like a real room full of wrestlers who could tell who belonged. That push for realism did not stop once they got to Spokane, Washington. Director Harold Becker wanted routines that looked and felt like real high school wrestling life. So the production leaned into it. The 6 a.m. practices shocked people who thought movies were supposed to be easier than real sports. They ran miles, lifted weights, and went through full contact drills, over and over, the same way wrestlers grind through a season. A lot of the training and wrestling scenes were shot inside Rogers High School's gym, and local teens were used as extras, so the background felt alive instead of staged. Modine described the atmosphere as electric, and it makes sense, because when the person across from you is actually skilled, the whole room changes. Even the big match at the end was filmed at Spokane Falls Community College, and that choice helped the movie feel raw, in a way fans still talk about. While the wrestling was being built with muscle and bruises, the film also chased tension in a totally different way. There is that steamy motel scene with Modine and Linda Fiorentino, and it took 22 takes to get it where Becker wanted it. The goal was electric tension, and the process turned intense because the moment had to feel risky, but still controlled. What made it even more exhausting was the way Michael Schoeffling's ad-libbed dialogue reportedly pushed the edge of the scene, and that energy helped feed the R rating the film landed with. Fiorentino was in her first major role, so she had to keep pace even when the moment shifted. After hours of trying, the scene finally clicked, and Modine later praised how Fiorentino adapted when things were not perfectly neat or predictable. And then something strange happened once the movie met the outside world. Vision Quest got good reactions for the performances and the wrestling realism, but it still flopped financially. It made only $13 million worldwide against a $15 million budget. Yet the soundtrack did the opposite. Madonna's Crazy for You, released on February 12, 1985, shot to #1 and started pulling attention toward the music. The soundtrack climbed to #11 on the US Billboard chart, went platinum, and sold over 1 million copies. The wave got so big that the movie was even re-released in Europe under the title Crazy for You to ride that momentum. So, in a weird way, what could have been remembered as a box office miss turned into a music win that kept the film alive in people's heads. For Schoeffling, that kind of attention came with a trap. After Vision Quest, agents started pitching him as the next Rocky, and wrestling biopics started getting pushed in his direction. He did not want to be boxed in as the wrestling guy forever. He talked about typecasting and how it could shrink your whole career into one image. So he said no. The offers got fewer. The path got quieter. But the choice also showed the kind of person he was, someone who would rather lose noise than lose control. Eventually, he walked away from acting completely, moved to Pennsylvania, and started a furniture-making business, trading a loud industry for a life that did not chase cameras. Still, even after Vision Quest, the jobs he took did not exactly get safer or simpler. In 1986, while filming Let's Get Harry, he played Corey Burke in a rescue story set in Colombia, and one of the biggest moments involved a helicopter crash with real pyrotechnics. On-set reports say unsafe conditions followed the production, and that pyrotechnic experts even quit over safety concerns before the big explosion scene. Then things reportedly went wrong anyway. A junior technician set off the pyrotechnics, the helicopter spun out of control, and it nearly killed everyone on board. Only one brief shot of the spinning Sikorsky helicopter ended up in the final cut. But the danger was real in that moment. Schoeffling was said to be just feet away and suffered singed eyebrows. The whole thing sits in that ugly corner of 1980s filmmaking where authentic sometimes meant reckless, and people paid for it. That same film also became known for a different kind of chaos later on. Let's Get Harry bombed at the box office, grossing only $3.6 million against a budget closer to $10 million. The production was tied up in rewrites and studio pressure, and director Stuart Rosenberg disowned the final version and used the pseudonym Alan Smithy. In a rare 1987 interview, Schoeffling openly blamed studio interference, describing a mess where scenes were cut, rewritten, and reshot to satisfy executives. The result, critics said, was confusing, and the failure pushed his distrust of Hollywood even deeper. Around that same time, he also appeared on The Hitchhiker in 1986, in an episode called Dead Man's Curve. He played Lance, described as a bisexual killer who seduces and manipulates before revealing something violent underneath. The episode aired uncut on HBO, which was rare then because of how direct it was about sex and violence. Reports say it drew over 2 million viewers and became a cult favorite. People started whispering about the role as a queer icon moment because of how bold it felt for the time, and because the portrayal was layered instead of simple. Even for a show rooted in horror, the frank treatment of desire stood out, and that performance stayed in the memory longer than people expected. Then came another 1986 project that put him in real danger again, just in a different landscape. Belizaire the Cajun had him playing Hippolyte Lager in Louisiana bayous, with gritty swamp shootouts and the constant worry of wildlife. The filming happened on location in Cecilia, Henderson, and Lafayette, where real alligators were around the water. During one escape scene, the crew reportedly had to halt filming twice when actual gators got too close to the actors. Safety was a constant concern, and the authenticity came with a price. But the result helped the film earn a cult following, and Schoeffling's work became one of the standouts people mention when they talk about it. What makes his story even more surprising is what he walked away from. In 1985, he was offered the role of Iceman in Top Gun. That single choice could have turned him into a household name next to Tom Cruise. Instead, he turned it down. He called fighter jets glorified toys and said he wanted projects with more substance, especially wrestling dramas that felt closer to his own background. The role went to Val Kilmer, who became a major star, while Schoeffling stayed on his own track. It was the kind of decision that looks strange on paper, but it fits once you realize he never seemed hungry for fame the way Hollywood expects. And then, in December 1990, Mermaids arrived and made him feel unavoidable for a moment. The film premiered with Cher and a young Winona Ryder, and it brought him back into the center of attention. The story was set in 1963 Massachusetts, following the Flax family as they moved to a small coastal town, and Schoeffling played Joe, the convent caretaker. Ryder, who was only 9 years old, was captivated and called him her real-life Jake Ryan, like she was connecting him straight back to 16 Candles. But behind the scenes, the mood was not always warm. The set was known for tension, especially between Cher and Schoeffling, and the pressure to get certain moments right started wearing on him. One scene became the symbol of that pressure. The pool kiss between Charlotte and Joe took 17 takes, with Cher insisting he show more passion, even though he seemed reluctant and uncomfortable. Crew members described an energy that was intense and sometimes awkward, and Schoeffling often kept to himself. During breaks, instead of bonding at parties, he would sit alone and carve wood, like he was already building an exit in his mind. Mermaids still succeeded, earning $53 million worldwide, and critics praised his brooding restraint. His paycheck was said to be $750,000, the biggest he ever got. And there is also the story that he anonymously donated half of it, $375,000, to Temple University's wrestling program. That kind of detail fits his personality in a strange way, because even at his peak, he seemed drawn toward quiet choices. After Mermaids, the mystery became the disappearance. Winona Ryder later called him the one who got away from fame. And that line stuck because it explains the whole arc in one breath. He had the look, the roles, the momentum, and even a box office hit sitting right there. Yet he still walked away, choosing a reclusive life in Pennsylvania and a craft that let him work with his hands instead of being watched. And when you trace it back, from 6 a.m. wrestling drills in Spokane to studio meddling, near misses on dangerous sets, and that final pressure cooker with Cher, it starts to feel less like a sudden vanishing. Michael Schoeffling was never the kind of actor who played it safe, and that became obvious on Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken in 1991. The film was shot in the Florida Keys with live horses, and the days were long, the weather kept shifting, and the danger was always sitting right there in the open. Still, he insisted on doing the real stunts, real 40-foot plunges on horseback. It was the kind of choice that makes a crew both impressed and nervous at the same time. Director Steve Miner later confirmed that Schoeffling kept pushing to do it himself, even after cracking a rib during a fall, and he refused to use a stunt double, even when safety people tried to slow him down. The shoot stretched to 90 days, and by the end, people around him were talking about his commitment with a mix of respect and disbelief. And then the strange part came, because the movie did not lift him the way everyone expected. Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken underperformed and grossed only $7.7 million. And the moment that should have opened bigger doors suddenly felt like a dead end. That is where his story swerved hard. Instead of chasing the next role, he walked away. Media reports say he retired from acting at age 30, and Hollywood could not understand it because scripts were waiting, including talk of a Flatliners sequel. Around the same time, he was also tied to an infamous rumor that he turned down a $2 million offer to star in Teen Wolf 2 in 1990, and he allegedly insulted the project so harshly that it poisoned relationships with agents. Whether people believed every detail or not, The main fact stayed the same in their minds. He was pulling back when everyone else was pushing forward. That tension followed him into what is often described as his last big audition moment. He went in for the role of Lieutenant Jonathan Kendrick in A Few Good Men in 1992, and the story goes that he competed with Tom Cruise and lost the part to Cruise. Reports say director Rob Reiner told him his reading was too wooden, and Schoeffling stormed out of the room. After that, the offers did not come in the way they used to. The industry began to treat him as a question mark, and in Hollywood, a question mark can turn into a closed door fast. So he did the thing people still talk about decades later. He left. Reports say he quit acting in 1991 at just 31, right after starring in Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken as Al Carver. And instead of chasing fame, he went back to Newfoundland, Pennsylvania. Not the Canada one, his hometown. He started building handmade furniture in his garage, and by 1993, he had launched a woodworking business that became his real work and his real routine. Fans were stunned because he had been Jake Ryan in 16 Candles in 1984, and that image had money written all over it. Sequels, nostalgia projects, endorsements, easy checks. But Schoeffling, according to later reports, did not want the actor life where you starve 90% of the time. He wanted stability. He wanted a life that felt solid in his hands, not a life that could vanish after one bad weekend at the box office. That choice made even more sense to people who looked at his personal life. He married model Valerie Carpenter Bernstein in 1987, after meeting on the set of Vision Quest, and their romance stayed intense but private. In a 2014 interview, Valerie said Michael hated what fame did to a person. She called it a cage. He avoided red carpets and interviews even when money was on the table. They moved away from Los Angeles to rural Pennsylvania in the early 1990s, and the story says he once told someone he would rather watch the seasons change than sit through any Hollywood premiere. They raised 2 children, Zane and Scarlett, and the family stayed away from attention so completely that it started to feel unreal in an industry built on being seen. Then the myth grew because the silence never broke. In 2002, GQ magazine tried to find him for a profile, and reporters even went to his woodworking shop in Newfoundland, Pennsylvania, but they were turned away. He had not done a single interview since 1987. GQ reportedly dubbed him the Salinger of actors, and that label stuck because it captured what people could not accept. A teen idol who simply refused to perform himself for the public. No fresh photos, no comeback interview, nothing to sell the story back to the world. And when the world tried to pull him back with money, the answer stayed the same. In 1995, producers allegedly offered him a massive $1 million deal to return as Jake Ryan in a 16 Candles sequel. The story goes that he exploded and told his agent, "Jake Ryan is dead," and the message got relayed to the studio. People in Hollywood repeated it because it sounded too bold to be real, yet it also sounded exactly like the man they believed he had become. Someone who thought nostalgia was a trap. Someone who refused to cash in on a role that belonged to the 1980s. Years passed, and the only real cracks in the wall came through family. By 2018, his daughter Scarlett had started modeling and occasionally posted photos that included her father. Those rare glimpses showed a gray-haired man who looked nothing like the old screen image, and that only fueled the obsession. Rumors flew in every direction, that he lived in a remote cabin, that he left the country, but the steadier reports said he was still in Pennsylvania, still working with wood, still protecting the same circle of privacy. That is why the details around his business get repeated almost like folk stories. People say he runs Schoeffling Woodworks in Newfoundland, Pennsylvania, crafting custom cherry tables that sell for around $10,000 each. They say he sells through word of mouth and referrals only, never online, never through showrooms, and with no website, no social media, and no customer list that could leak his location or his routine. Some accounts even claim he said in the 1990s that "Furniture is me, no directors dictating," and the line gets quoted because it sounds like a clean break from scripts and studio control. There are also claims about how long the work takes, around 200 hours for a single table, using Pennsylvania cherry wood, and that buyers wait 6 months or more. People have even said fans travel from California just to try to commission something, and most get turned away because there is no casual access to him. Only personal contact. Only the way he wants it. So when 2025 sightings started spreading, it hit with extra force. Neighbors in Newfoundland, Pennsylvania, reportedly spotted 65-year-old Schoeffling hauling lumber, working alone, wearing a full beard and a flannel shirt. Almost unrecognizable. Fans began organizing little pilgrimages just to see where he works. And the stories say most leave with nothing because he rarely engages and never feeds the legend. The same pattern kept repeating. He exists, but he will not perform his existence. That pattern shows up again in the reported Netflix offer. In 2024, he was allegedly offered $500,000 to appear in a Netflix docuseries about 1980s heartthrobs, with names such as Molly Ringwald and Anthony Michael Hall involved. The story says he declined, explaining that he did not want to be exploited for my youth and preferred to remain anonymous. Whether people saw it as stubborn or brave, it fit the same line he had been walking since the early 1990s. No deals, no rebrand, no comeback tour. Even the stories about his body became part of the myth. Some claims say he kept a wrestler-level physique at 64 because of daily shop labor, and that local gym talk even described him benching over 200 pounds and deadlifting more than 300 pounds. There are also rumors of morning calisthenics, afternoon weight training, and a lean diet. Hard work, clean routine. The kind of life that looks boring from far away, but feels powerful when you imagine it day after day. And then his old co-stars started talking about that absence as if it was a missing person shaped like an idea. Reports say Molly Ringwald shared in a 2024 interview that she had not spoken to him in decades and called his retreat the bravest anti-fame move anyone could make. Anthony Michael Hall reportedly added his own comment on Entertainment Tonight in May 2025, joking, "Where is Mr. Handsome when we need him?" and describing him as like a big brother on set. The tone sounds playful, but you can feel the real thing under it. A friendship that ended without closure. A person who stepped away so fully that even the people beside him could not follow.